Chapter 12. I followed behind him, picking my way through the mud, rusty beer cans, odd boards, and piles of dog shit. Inside the trailer, it smelled of urine, cigarette smoke, and stale beer. The walls, the furniture, everything inside was stained with nicotine. The windows that weren't flag-covered had foil-covered cardboard duct tape all over them. The furniture was stained and covered in porn magazines, most of which seemed to reflect his interest in human pain and suffering. Some even had children. I threw a stack of them off an old rocking chair and sat down. "Coffee?" he asked. I shook my head no and tried my best not to breathe through my nose. The dogs were still barking out back. He took a mug and dumped its contents into the sink, then sloshed some coffee into it from an antiquated Mr. Coffee on the kitchen counter. "Take it. It's polite." I took it and pretended to take a sip. It was truly black, and it had an oily sheen on the top. "Thought you'd forgotten about me after all these years, Crow. Everyone else has. I don't get any visitors, not even from my old friends from the job back in '49. I just sit here waiting, collecting my check. To cut my benefits. They say I only work part-time and they can't afford it. Had to supplement with dogs out back. Brings in some money. Was able to get that truck out there." "Breeder?" I asked. I knew as soon as I said it I wasn't going to like the answer. "Yup. And fighting. My dogs always win, you know. Got some hellhound blood in 'em. Build 'em a little arena out back. They'll rip anything apart for fun, even kill each other sometimes just 'cause they got bored." He chuckled. "But that's all within the guidelines you set up. I don't leave the county. Just like you said, I don't get to do much of my old fun stuff anymore. Old place has been condemned and the kids, they just ain't coming around like they used to. Got a couple paranormal groups want to investigate, but they was too scared of them dogs out back. Ghost hunters ain't no fun anyway. They just like that boy's auntie. Wasn't scared of me neither. Them that already believed, it takes all the shock factor out of it when the shit goes down. And that's half the fun. Kind of like popping somebody's cherry." "I miss that, Crow." "Nothing personal. Just doing my job," I said. "You like your job?" he asked. I shook my head. "Well, that's too bad. I loved mine. A man, or whatever you want to call us, should take pride in his work. I took pride in mine. Carved my name right on my work. Remember that, Crow? Like an artist's signature. I was at the top of my game back then. And that boy, he was just like a ripe peach when he called me and invited me in. Sweet little thing he was, too. Smart. Whatever happened to my little boy, Crow? Can you tell me? He and I were going to go places if things hadn't gone bottoms up back at the Two Rivers. I was at home inside him. I could make him do the most wonderful things. You know, I had that boy tell one of those old fuckers that he should come stick his cock in his mouth because priest cum tastes like the blood of Christ." He slapped his knee and laughed his gravelly laugh. You should have seen his face. I could tell he wanted to, just for a minute. Just like all those fuckers do. Every man deep in his heart wants it from something as sweet as a boy like that. Tell me, Crow, what happened to my pet, my boy? I can't tell you that. And you know it works that way. He isn't yours anymore, I said. I think about him sometimes. How he would look now and the things we could have got done together. Imagine him, little boys and girls of his own to play with. He started to drool a little as his eyes glazed over with lust. I wonder if he has any kids. Well, Mr. Lewis, I can't tell you that. I do have some questions for you, though. I need information about your specialty, possession, I said, trying to change the subject. And why would you want to know that? He asked. So you can use that information against guys like me? Why should I tell you shit, Crow? I'm working on a complaint filed by the Vices in Casey. It's on their behalf. I can give you proof if you want, I said. If I called Leo, I knew he would back me up on this, but I didn't want to do that unless I had to. The Vices. Why didn't you ask them? He asked, getting up and unzipping his fly. I gotta take a shit. He left the room and headed back to the trailer. I could hear him grunting. The smell in the trailer intensified to the point I could taste it in the back of my throat. I'm stepping out for some air, I said as I opened the door, letting the spring slam it shut behind me. The air outside smelled like manure and rotting hay and dog shit. I sat there for 10 minutes on the wooden stoop. The dogs had stopped barking, and it was quiet now. There was a small light inside the grand old house, just for a moment, and then it was gone. There was a reason Mr. Lewis had been assigned to this specific house. I could feel how human suffering had scarred this land, making a weak spot between the worlds, a rift, allowing this place to relive that suffering for all eternity. The slaves who had worked and suffered and died here, the family that had been thrown out of their home and forcefully marched away by the Union soldiers, the deaths of so many men fighting on either side of the war between the states. Places hold memories, and what I was seeing was probably just an imprint of someone who had been here long ago, like a video recording played back over and over. I kept watching, but the light didn't return. A few moments later, I heard movement in the trailer. I opened the door and braced myself for the stench that was about to assault my nostrils. Inside, I saw a brief flicker of Mr. Lewis's true form at the end of the hallway where the late afternoon sun couldn't penetrate. Long, arachnid legs with spikes at the joints, covered in hair, a red, bloated body above. He moved carefully and gracefully back into the front room, slowly coming back to his illusionary, stocky self in his stained t-shirt and torn jeans. He rubbed his stubble-covered head with a meaty hand, sat down on the couch, and lit a cigarette. He picked up a magazine called Extreme Submissive and started leafing through it. I sat down again in the rocking chair. The smell of the cigarette somehow lessened the stench coming from everywhere else. I looked at my watch. It was 3:15 p.m. in January. The sun was going to set in the next hour, and I would be damned if I was going to be in the Soul Eater's lair after the sun went down. He couldn't kill me, but nevertheless I didn't want to be there. Spiders freak me out. Tell you what, Mr. Lewis, I saw a truck stop back a couple miles up the road. How about I treat you to some greasy food and a fresh pot of coffee? On me, I added. You want to take me out to dinner? A horrible smile crept across his face from ear to ear, unnaturally wide. I could see behind the missing teeth there was another set, and another behind that. Why, I just feel like the belle of the ball. Great, I said, with a combined feeling of dread at the thought of watching this grotesque creature from hell eat diner food, and a strange sense of relief that I wouldn't be here after dark, after all. Why don't you take your truck and I'll take my car? That way I can just get on the highway there and head back to Kansas City. Well, now, you gone done and hurt my feelings there, Crow. He made an exaggerated, sad face. Why, you don't want to be in an enclosed space with harmless little old me, do you? I smiled and tried to come up with a quick excuse, but my mind went blank. You said you appreciated honesty, Mr. Lewis, and honestly, you smell like an open can of ass. I just had the car cleaned. You understand. He stared at me for a second and then started guffawing, bending backwards in laughter. And when I say backwards, I mean at an unnatural angle, his stubble-covered head nearly touching the floor. When he stopped, he said, "God damn, boy, you got some balls. I like you for a crow. Lot better than that uptight jackass that done run the big river back east. Let's go eat. Maybe there'll be some kid there. Haven't had any eye candy in a little while." I tried not to run out of the trailer and into the car, but he probably noticed how quickly I was moving. I just wanted out of there, away from the smell and the filth and the putrefaction. This creature was the kind of evil I dreaded stumbling across. Even for a soul eater, he was repugnant. I let him lead the way, following his truck down the dirt road and back onto the main highway. I knew he was going to ask for something horrible in return for helping me, something I wouldn't be able to give. Like knowledge of where his last victim was, or pictures of him, or worse, the knowledge of where his victim's kids were. I couldn't give him any of those things, but I needed the information. We pulled into the parking lot of the truck stop. The sign above it said it was a Flying J. There weren't a lot of truckers yet, and it was too light for the prostitutes to start plying their trade between the big rigs. I might be able to get out of here before the sun set, if I played things right. When I got to the door, he was waiting for me, cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He crushed it out before opening the door. "After you, Judge," he said. I walked into the diner with him following. I didn't like having him at my back. It smelled better in here, like frying oil that had been reheated too many times. Anything would be better than the horrible smell inside that trailer that still clung to my clothes and hair. I took off my coat in hopes it would dissipate, but it lingered, mixing with the smell of fried food, coffee, and maple syrup. The hostess was a matronly woman dressed in one of those old-fashioned waitress uniforms. It was light blue and white. She looked at Mr. Lewis and smiled. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. If it ain't you, Lou. Haven't seen you in about a week, dearie. This your son?" she asked, nodding at me. Lou cocked his head to one side as he smiled sweetly at the woman. "Nah, this is my nephew. Just come to check on me from the big city. I'm still an eligible bachelor, but you know that, Nadine." His eyebrows went up and down suggestively, and she giggled. I could see the vestiges of that charming devil I escorted 60 years ago, the one in the expensive pinstripe suit and silk tie. Most humans, when confronted with any demon, no matter how charming its disguise, will have the hair on the back of their neck stand up, or an uncomfortable chill run down their spine. Something about them just seems off. I imagine it's the same way prey feels when a predator is near. It's instinct. But soul eaters have a way of hiding this from their prey, of blending into their surroundings, even luring their prey closer. Remember how angels and demons are one and the same? Yeah. All soul eaters were once slated to be guardian angels before they fell. Guardian angels walk among humans, look like humans, protect humans. Soul eaters project all of their charm and comfort of their original form. It would take a human with an extraordinary amount of perception to be able to see through all the glamour projected by one of them. And Mr. Lewis was one of the best of his kind, even if he had been left out in the sticks to rot for the last 60 years. He still had it, and Nadine thought he was the shit. She just had no clue how close to the truth shit actually was. Nadine sat us at a booth in the back of the diner and brought us coffee and menus. Lou slapped her on the ass when she turned to walk away. She turned around with eyes sparkling, feigning shock. "Lou, you keep your paws to yourself," she laughed. "How them grandbabies of yours, Nadine?" he asked with a wink in my direction. He was going to make this the most uncomfortable meal of my life, but there wasn't anything I could do about it. He was allowed all of his filth and evil. He was allowed to spread destruction and suffering wherever he could. He was just doing his job, no matter how sickening and horrific it was. "Oh, they're good. Good, sweet boys," she said. "Wish I could see more of 'em, but their mama's going to be moving to Kansas City in a month, and she's taking them with her. Ain't no work out here. Thinks she can do better by them up there." "Oh, that's too bad, Nadine," he said. "I'm sorry to hear it." Nadine went back to her station, and Mr. Lewis went back to studying the menu. "I hope Jenna's waitressing tonight," said Mr. Lewis. "She's a cute young thing, and pregnant too. I love looking at pregnant women. Something so sweet and ripe about them." He licked his lips. "What are you gonna have, nephew? The chicken fried steak is mighty good." "I'll just get a cheeseburger and fries," I said. "Let's get down to it, Mr. Lewis. I need information, and I have authorization to ask for your help from the 7 Deadly Sins department heads in KC. You have to cooperate with me without condition." "Without condition? Boy, you don't know what you are talking about. I don't give a shit about them pencil pushers back in the city. They don't do shit for me. They cut my benefits, they cut my pay, and they set me out here to the middle of bumfuck nowhere Shitsville to rot. What the fuck would I help them?" he hissed. The waitress came over to take our order. I assumed she was Jenna, given Mr. Lewis's previous description. She was young and blonde and about 10 months pregnant from the looks of her, and very tired. I could see it in her eyes. Her soul was a soft lilac flame that flickered around her, and within it I could see the beginnings of a new soul within. Little blue and purple sparks swirling within her mother's lilac aura. Mr. Lewis looked her up and down and then winked at me. She placed her hand protectively over her belly when she felt his eyes on her. She was one of the ones who could sense the predator she was waiting on. She quickly took our orders and headed back to the kitchen. "Oh, she's a smart one," he said. "One of them ones that can tell what's what and who's who. Hate those kind of women, but they are the most fun to find in the dark." "It's getting dark soon, ain't it?" He licked his lips with his fat tongue. "Can we get back on topic, Mr. Lewis? You were saying how much you hate the Vices. While I agree with you personally on your opinion of those 4 assholes, this is business that they say is coming from the top, if you know what I mean," I said. "I am sure your cooperation wouldn't go unnoticed." He spit a dark glob of tobacco into his empty water glass and frowned at me. "Really? You, a judge, working for the devil? I find that hard to believe, Crow. Your kind are always all hoity-toity, full of I channel the wrath of God bullshit. Your kind don't work for none of us. Never have and never will. That's why you made your decision against our side back in '49. That whole trial was rigged from the beginning. Ain't no such thing as an impartial judge." "No, that trial was not rigged. You didn't have your fucking documentation in order. That is why we have to allow the other side access to the boy. You got to him through the aunt prior to the age of consent at 12. We had no date-stamped evidence he had signed over his soul to you that said you did it after the proper age. You fucked yourself in your own ass with that sloppy work, Mr. Lewis, I said. We didn't even rule that you had lost custody. We just ruled that the other party had to be allowed access. And after the second chance, you failed to seal the deal with the boy. I had nothing to do with that. I didn't fail to seal the deal. They forced the host down his throat and then sloshed some wine in. That was every bit as bad as what I did, fucking assholes, he said. Look, I'm asking for your help because of an investigation into the activities of one of Michael's own angels, who is now using your techniques to spread his good news to everyone in Kansas City. Ever hear of something like that? I asked. What? An angel? Possessing someone? I doubt that, Crow. Angels don't possess, he said. What about your boy? I seem to remember a certain angel with a fiery sword's voice coming out of the mouth of your precious peach of a boy. Don't you, Mr. Lewis? I asked. He growled at me and showed me his teeth, and a low, weird, clicking noise came from the back of his throat. His eyes flashed red for a moment. I'd like to take that fiery sword and fuck that motherfucker up his black ass. That's what I'd like to do. How dare he? How dare he do that with my boy? I love that boy, and he loved me. We were going to be together forever. We promised each other. A tear actually rolled down his cheek, which he quickly wiped away. Jenna came back to the table with the chicken fried steak and my cheeseburger. I thanked her, and she again scurried away from our booth as fast as she could go. Look, Mr. Lewis, I need your help. This guy works for Michael. His methods are your methods, and he is doing a good enough job with them that the guy downstairs is starting to notice. This could be your ticket out of this shithole if you play it right, I said. The burger was good and greasy. The fries were old and stale. In any case, they smelled like heaven right now. Fine. What the hell do you want to know? He asked. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but at least I might get somewhere with him now. I needed the information if I was going to understand what happened to Amanda. How do you choose a potential host? I asked. Well, he said, his mouth full of steak and gravy, I think it's best to find them young. I always like the young ones, impressionable, easy to work with, and they trust you, you know? Is that just your personal taste or textbook? I asked, because this angel is not going after children. His current host is a guy who's in his 30s, and he was grooming another human who was college age. Well, if you go by the book and you ain't got no balls or artistic ability, it might be better go that route. That way you don't run into no technicalities like I did back in 49 with the age of consent and all that shit. But adults is tricky because their brains are already hardwired. You gotta look at the wiring, see where the circuits have their weakness. See, it's kind of like being one of them their computer hacker guys. You gotta find a place in the network where there's an opening, like the boy's aunt. She wanted to talk with dead folks. Wasn't really born with the sight, but convinced herself that she was. And when I showed up, she was visiting psychics, trying to put herself in trances, but it wasn't working for her. It wouldn't work because she wasn't gifted that way. It was easy to present myself in a charming manner as her spirit guide come to help her on her spiritually enlightened path. And with that, I got the password to her brain. I pulled out my notebook and started taking notes. What other kind of weaknesses? Oh, People who have holes in their souls. Like kids that grew up with no one loving them. Abuse victims are perfect. And you can raise them up yourself while you're in a different host. That's one reason shit runs in families. Imagine what I could have done if my sweet Peach had grown up and had babies. Damn it, Crow, you're bringing back such bittersweet memories. He stopped and lit a cigarette, his plate of food only halfway eaten. Damn, he was the kind of smoker who smoked when he ate. There was a no smoking sign right above our table. I pointed it out and cleared my throat. Ain't nobody gonna say shit to me, Crow. Not with my glamour in play. Put your panties down out of your ass crack and let me tell you what you need to know so you can go home to your fancy town and I can go home to my dogs. He said, you want to know more, right? Then let me fucking smoke my fucking cigarette and you shut the fuck up. He took a long drag and blew the smoke in my face before he continued. So, holes. Sometimes you can find them in people who are drug users, addicts. Sometimes it's a genetic flaw, might show up as a mental illness. Back in the day, they called it a generational curse. It's rare, but it happens. Super intense, negative emotions that are repeated can open a hole, but not just depression, but like self-loathing, anger, lust, bitterness. Those are my kind of people. And we get along great once I get in. It can also be completely involuntary. Trauma can do it. Like those guys coming back from war with the, what they call it, PTSD. And then there's those rare ones who just choose to welcome us in. The ones who ask for it. My boy was like that in the beginning. He wanted me inside him. He turned his attention back to the plate of food in front of him. What about Ouija boards and tarot, all that? I have heard that can open people up, I said. Huh, Ouija? Oh, yeah. 'Cause it's an invitation. Tarot? Not so much. See, with Ouija, people saying, move my body, which is exactly what we like to do. Tarot, just cards and symbols the person uses. It's a tool, and they use the tool. The tool don't use them, he answered. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I said, so, do you just hop in through the hole in their mind when it opens, or what? Nah, that takes grooming. You gotta play it right and move real slow, or you scare them off. It's a seduction, not an invasion. You look around, you see what they desire, what really makes them tick. Do they want love? Do they want revenge? Do they want to feel special or happy or maybe just be numb for a while? You give them a little bit of what they want, just a taste. He licked his lips and sucked some gravy off his fingers. And you make them feel happy. Mess with that serotonin and dopamine and them other chemicals. It gives them just a little hit and then you leave and you wait. You leave? Yeah, they always want you to come back. And they always ask. Never tell them who you really are. You have to be what they want you to be, what they need you to be. My boy, he wanted a friend, someone who would stand up for him when people were mean to him, a guardian angel. And that's what I am. After all, deep down. Right, Crow? I don't know any who own dogfighting rings, but whatever you say, Mr. Lewis, whatever you say. I said. Jenna came by and poured me another cup of coffee. The light outside was starting to dim now. You're probably right about that one, he laughed. Fucking goody two-shoes angels. Don't know how to have any fun. One of the reasons I quit that gig when I did. Ah, well, you got more questions, or can I go chase some tail around this place now? A couple more, Mr. Lewis. Can you tell me more about the grooming process? How long does it usually last? I asked. Depends on what you want to do with them after you move in. I mean, some of them, they just throwaways, disposables. You might get in and realize that the piece of shit has a tumor growing in his lung and will be dead in 3 years. What good is that to you? Or maybe they have a family member who has a sight and the ability to try and intercede. Or maybe you moved in too fast and they look like they're having second thoughts. With a disposable, you can go one of two ways. You could do purely physical attack on their body and give them some weird disease that doesn't respond to medicine and can't be explained. Sometimes we like to do the whole stigmata thing just to be assholes. And that's always funny. He giggled a bit. That's called depression. The other thing you could do with a disposable is an obsession. I personally think obsession is a bit more fun, but I'm an artiste. You know, I'm a damn good artiste. So, tell me about obsession, I said. Obsession. Obsession is about fucking with their mind, making them think weird, fucked up shit. It's like OCD on steroids, but it is twice as fun. You get them all in knots with some sort of obsessive thought process that can be completely irrational, even absurd. This one girl I had a long time back, I prefer boys, but sometimes you gotta settle, you know. That girl, she was a disposable. I convinced her she had worms under her skin. It was great. I'd make her skin crawl, but then make it stop as soon as anyone came near. She started picking at her skin, trying to get them out, first with her fingernails, and then with needles and knives and whatever she could find. She couldn't sleep because as soon as the lights were out, I'd start the crawling again. And then she'd go crazy ripping at all the scabs. She stopped eating too because I told her the food had the worms in it. Did she die? I asked. Yeah. Took a long while too. He rubbed his hands together gleefully. It was the infection that did it. Don't you soul eaters feel the human's pain of dying when you leave a body? Why would you ever want to kill a host if it's like that? Oh, that's only if we get forced out, not if we remove ourselves. See, we come and we go within the body as we please because the human's body belongs to us once we make a claim. With a disposable, we just step out and watch them die. He smiled that demonic smile again, showing the rows of teeth behind his chapped lips. That's the best part of obsession, when they take their own life of their own free will. Ain't free will the best, Crow? You said earlier that the last boy was different, that he invited you in and that you loved him. What was different? I asked, still scribbling in my book. My boy is a special one. You come across one of him 2, maybe 3 times in a century. Smart ones, super smart ones. I guess you could say he was going to be great no matter what he did. You know those pretty soul fires people have? His was so bright and the colors would just change and flare and spark all these pretty peachy reds and orange and yellows. Not like most humans who are basically just one color. He was just like pretty dancing fire. I thought back to Amanda and her soul colors. She fit this description perfectly. How is that an indication of a good host more than, say, just a normal, everyday human? I asked. You know somebody like this, don't you, Crow? He smiled a little knowing smile and tilted his head coquettishly. Those ones are special. It ain't just soul eaters who sees it when it's there. Everyone can see it, even the other humans. Some of them it repels, and others just want to come sit by the fire. Who is it? He asked hungrily. Nobody. The one I know is dead now, I told him. Dead? I only ask because those ones are harder than most humans because they got a purpose. Something important to do with their lives. That's why their flame burns them up like that. Damn shame. I would like to have met him. Yeah, dead. So, how did you get into your special one? You said he invited you, that he wanted you? Is that really the truth? I looked him right in the eye because I could not believe for 1 minute that any boy of 12 would want something as atrocious and horrifying as Mr. Lewis anywhere near him. Yes and no. See, you gotta put your best foot forward in these situations. If I'd walked in all spindly-legged and jagged teeth, he would have run for the hills just like any human. You gotta be better than that. You gotta clean yourself up. Gotta look like the thing they need to fill that hole that they got in their mind. A friend, a playmate, a way to be more powerful or in control. So that's what I did. He missed his sweet little auntie. And I had been in that auntie for a long while before she passed. They had done Ouija together, played around, talking to dead folks. Auntie made him feel special and loved. So after she died, I took Auntie's place. His features started to soften in front of me, becoming thinner, frailer, more feminine. His voice changed along with his appearance. I looked around the restaurant to see if anyone had noticed, but no one was anywhere near our table. Don't worry about them, sweetie, Mr. Lewis continued in a middle-aged woman's voice, complete with an East Coast accent. They only see what I allow them to see. I've been in the area long enough that I have a modicum of control over the whole stupid lot of them. Some more than others. He pointedly stared at Jenna, who was taking an order at a table on the other side of the dining room. His face returned to the fat redneck shape it had when I saw him at the trailer. Even the boys' family thought it was Auntie, but it wasn't. And by the time they saw it, I was already in. And the boy and I were one. Together forever. BFFs, whatever you want to call it. And when he needed help, I was the one he called to. Not his mama and not his daddy, not Jesus fucking Christ, or that slut Mary, or even the Creator himself.